All right, cool. Says we're live everywhere. We'll see who joins us over here in Start Mata as we're going. But got some people already watching over in LinkedIn. Welcome. Uh, got Twitch people. There's some drops on Twitch if you want to get some Crunchyroll rewards over there. And then we're also on YouTube. So, Paul,
Gary.
please introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. My name's Paul Shrater, and have a series of businesses that are all currently active. But going back further, went to the Wharton School back in the day, focused on entrepreneurial management, and then spent 9 years in film and TV as a producer and writer. Ended up selling a script for $1 million, had offices on the Sony lot and all that. But then this new thing called e-commerce was coming around, and had this idea with my family to set up an e-commerce store just when people were trusting putting credit cards online for the first time, and launched the website minimus.biz, which focuses on travel size toiletries, single serving food items, and basically everything miniature, with about 2,500 SKUs. So we were the Amazon of miniature things before Amazon became Amazon. That led into brands assuming we were manufacturing all those minis and asking us to manufacture their line of minis of their barbecue sauce or shampoo, which we weren't doing. We're just buying and reselling. And taking a step back, that business also not only sells direct to consumer, but wholesale to hundreds of market segments: hospitals, cruise ships, sports teams, government agencies. And for almost 20 years, we've been supplying NASA with the astronauts on the space station for all their condiment packets and even cheese and hummus. And I've even shipped fruitcake into space a couple times. So then what happened? Back to these brands, or assuming we were manufacturing, I went and met with all these contract packagers and contract manufacturers all over Southern California. And they all said, how many millions of pieces do you want? And I said, well, my client just wants like 10,000 or 50,000. And they said, go away. So I realized there was yet another opportunity of things changing in society, where before the internet, to be an entrepreneur was not a normal thing. You had to have wealthy parents or serious capital, or it wasn't as prevalent as it is today. In fact, at the Wharton School, when I was there, the entrepreneurial program was on the second floor in the back corner of a building. Now there's a 7-story building just for entrepreneurship. So anyway, so we decided to launch another company, minimusproducts.biz, which is unique in the country in that we're a scaling facility that can take brands from small production runs to large. We do food, we do supplements, we do personal care, beauty. We do liquids, powders, particulates, packets, stick packs, bottles, jars, cans, bags, kosher certified, organic certified. We can do OTC for topicals. And it's a $2,500 minimum order. So that's been a business going for a while. It's in a building about a mile from the building I'm in now. And then what happened was those brands were like, hey, you're doing your own e-commerce fulfillment down the street, direct to consumer and wholesale. Can you do it for me too? And they, by the way, immediately said, you're doing my minis. Can you do my full sizes too? So we immediately went into full size stuff. But anyway, that got us into the 3PL, or third party logistics fulfillment business, which it services startup brands, small brands, medium-sized brands, high-profile celebrities. We do a lot of work with, and mostly because what happened again is you had an industry that was used to pallet in, pallet out of goods, not individual item pick and pack, which is what e-commerce brought on. Which has with it a lot of other complexities of talking to your client every day, or being nimble and needing to make changes on the fly, or having your customer service team in-house out to the public on behalf of the client. So we were finding a lot of success in working with brands that weren't satisfied with working with some of these traditional fulfillment centers that were trying to pivot and adapt to this new e-commerce direct-to-consumer side of things. So we do a mix of both. We do both direct to consumer and wholesale B2B work for clients. But then Mondelez came along, the company that owns Nabisco and all that, and they asked us to help with some issues they were seeing in the food service distribution industry. National food service distributors were moving away from stocking what clients wanted to stocking what they make the most money on, which is not snacks. It's frozen food, private label, and other stuff. So when brands like Mondelez wanted to have national distribution, they couldn't get it 100% in 100% of the distribution centers of some of these national distributors. So they needed somebody to plug the gap, fill in the holes. And so we opened another warehouse in Ohio, in between Southern California and Ohio. We hit 86% of the US population within 2 days using FedEx Ground, leveraged from our 3PL fulfillment business. So we are now working with a lot of small snack brands on a program with Compass Food Buy, which is the largest group purchasing organization and operator in the country. So anywhere where there's a cafeteria, corporate, hospital, university, hotel, we work with a lot of the small brands of snacks because they said, hey, you think the big boys have a problem with distribution, the small brands have it even more, and consumers now want to try out all these interesting little small brands. Have another business as a TikTok marketing agency with actually a live selling studio in my warehouse here. Partnered with an agency from China that was brought over by TikTok corporate. So I going over to TikTok's headquarters here in Culver City. We're triple certified by TikTok to represent talent, represent brands, and also do affiliate marketing. We represent both talent and brands. And then have another business that's actually starting a capital raise related to high profile celebrities and online creators who want to be entrepreneurs in consumer products. And I can bring them something innovative in the category that they're passionate about, given I work with food scientists and chemists and inventors and all that. And then we co-own the business with them and do all the businessy stuff while they do the sort of promotion stuff and helping with sort of the brand concepts. So, and then have another business actually in the, I'll call it digital space, which is physical and digital product, mostly working with Roblox developers. We just launched our first product last week. The second one is going live tomorrow. So if you know Roblox games like Fish or Blade Ball, we're working with them. They will, Fish now is live, but Blade Ball goes live tomorrow, where if you like those games on Roblox, they're in the top games. You can get merch. You can buy it in the Roblox platform. So this is the first, as of a week or so ago, they launched Shopify is embedded within Roblox. So people playing games in Roblox can actually buy the merchandise while they're in game. And the biggest thing about this is the physical product comes with an exclusive digital product in the game you can only get if you buy the physical product. So it's a really cool way to integrate the digital world and digital products with physical products. So that's a new business I'm working on with an ex-major YouTuber and one of the largest Roblox game developer studios as a partner of ours. So that's my introduction.
I feel like it's you've managed to make it more concise than usual.
Practice.
There you go. Yeah, that's. I think these are good lessons for everyone. You want to practice, so I'm glad you come to the lunches so you can get that practice. There's a lot there, and hopefully people watching understand that if they have questions, you're a good person to ask them to because of your very, very extensive breadth of experiences in different areas of business and products and everything. But I want to go back to the beginning. You were a screenwriter. You sold a script, and that gave you a lot of capital to launch this business. I've had a lot of experience with you, and the theme that I really gravitated towards and respected was your attention to detail and how that provides people with a unique experience, and being aware of the intended outcomes you want people to have with different elements of a product or a brand, services, in order to have the most enjoyable experience. And one of the early examples that I had with you was when you're taking me on a tour and you're walking me through the packaging and how opening this package was providing people with an experience. And it wasn't only an experience for them to enjoy themselves, but with the intention of them sharing unboxing videos on YouTube, right? And so I'm curious, how much of this mindset was established early on as a screenwriter when, the methodology of creating a script
Mm.
and writing is very
Mhm.
much intentional to provide people with this entertainment experience or dramatic experience, whatever it is. Like, can you, like, expand on that? Share anything about that?
Yeah, now you touched on a couple things. The first one I'll mention is a philosophy that I have, and I've seen it in other places in business, but it sort of naturally just came about where I call it making a good idea great. So all too often what happens is you're sitting collaborating with, a team on, whether it's a brand owner, a celebrity, whoever, and you're sitting talking about, could be the packaging boxing experience or something else. And you land on a good idea and everybody gets excited and you're like, great. And you start moving on to something else. That's the moment to me where I say, how do we keep going? How do we make this even better? You don't stop when you're all like on your good idea. Like, so to me it's like, okay, we figured out a great printed box that helps with the experience a customer gets when they receive it. What goes in the box? Or what can we change about the box? Like what can we make funky or different? What, like the insert card where it says, thank you for your order. Let's make that on a paper that has seeds and flower seeds in it. So when you plant the thank you, it grows flower. And that may not be right for all brands, but figuring out how every aspect of that experience can collectively make it great, because that is what connects the consumer emotionally to the brand. And it's what I think Steve Jobs understood with Apple when he was obsessed over every aspect of that experience, from the box the phone comes in, even the way that the cords are wrapped. And like he's like, I want everything to feel fun and smooth, and enjoyable, because that is going to connect you emotionally to the brand. It's not just the features, it's not just the one thing where you go, oh, nice, and then you move on. If you can capture every aspect and keep wowing the person over and over, boom, 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 you create more of an emotional imprint with them in the brand. So to me, that gets at the first aspect of what you're talking about. The second thing you're talking about is storytelling and things coming from screenwriting. And that I think relates to the modern society of social media that we're in, which is really what social media is all about, is really storytelling. And, even from when Vine, allowed you, what is it, 6 seconds to tell a story, that forced people to understand and figure out how can you elicit an emotional response from a viewer in a very short period of time. Or whether you have 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes, with some of these short form aspects that a lot of social media has when people are scrolling through. And so taking the ideas of storytelling and the techniques of that into this modern era when, it's really about ego, and it's about it's like the old water cooler, back in the day before, social media, where people would gather at the office. Hey, did you watch the game? Did you see that here? Do you know about this band? The know about the band is the biggest thing. You would share a small known band with somebody because if they listened to it and liked it, it made you look good. The moment that band was popular, it wasn't as cool for you to share that with somebody. So you wanted to do it because it made you look good. It was your ego as to why you were sharing that with others. Now, you may think it was because you were trying to help them out and introduce it, but you're doing it also to make you look good. So social media is about the same thing. People are posting things that if someone likes it, it makes them look good. It boosts their ego. So you, as a brand, need to create things that I call share worthy. So if you think about everything in the context of being share worthy, you start to get into the emotional connections of storytelling. It's similar to what TikTok um, is, and I've been working with some of the folks at TikTok and even some of the other agencies in town that came over from China. China's 5 to 10 years ahead of us in live selling. It's more than 30% of all e-commerce in China is live selling. It's going to happen here. TikTok wants to be at the forefront on it. The problem is in China, because they're already ahead, the consumers have already evolved as to how they look at live selling. They go on platforms, they're looking for deals, they're looking for discounts. They're used to, I'll call it the used car salesman techniques that is being done, but they're okay with it because it's become the norm. we're not used to that here. So if you go on TikTok and you see people like just overly energetic and being like, "Oh, this pen, get it now. It's, $1.99 going fast." And all they're doing is hyping price, attributes, scarcity, like just traditional hard selling, techniques. Doesn't work that well. It can work okay. Doesn't work that well with the American consumer. We still need emotional connection with what we're doing with our social media and what we're scrolling through. So to me, I would do things like, I did a deal this morning with this pen that made me $1 million. I'm going to tell you about it. But I got to tell you, the enjoyment of using a good pen when closing a deal like that is super important. So if you want to have your experiences with things that you write be enjoyable, you want to get something like this. I'm going to tell you about that story in a second. But first, I'm going to tell you about these multicolored paper clips and how I fidget with them at my desk. So if you need a new fidget spinner type, toy, get some paper clips, like, or whatever it is. And then, now, by the way, the other aspect of that is now I've held the customer to listen to my pen story, which now the algorithm is going to like because I've kept my audience on longer and it's going to reward me with more viewers. Um, so, but my point is, like, you need to be engaging and connecting with the audience and all that. And with anything you're doing, any content, even PR pitches or whatever it is, you have to figure consumers want to emotionally connect. They don't want to be fed information. They don't want to, no one cares about your business. No one cares about your product. When brand owners enter that into their head and realize that's true, that it's boring to listen to that stuff, if you can adjust it and tell them about your brand or your product in an emotionally engaging way, that's what consumers will respond to.
Yeah, you touched on a couple different things that are really important. I want to go back to, like you said, the sunflowers, or the thank you note that you can plant and a sunflower grow from it. How it might not be great for every brand, but for very specific brands where it aligns with what they're trying to do, it's phenomenal. I'm curious from like methodology standpoint, how do you assess what is likely to be in alignment or really work against a brand when you're trying to go from a good idea to a great idea with these different elements that you're creating to enhance an experience or create a overwhelmingly enjoyable experience with all these different elements that are involved in, yeah, like a packaging or a product or whatever it may be.
A lot of it usually comes from the brand owner themselves. They already have a vision for the personality of the brand that they want. Oftentimes it mimics their own personality. But figuring out, is this a fun brand? Is it a serious brand? Is it a joking brand? Like what is the brand's personality? And it doesn't have to be consistent 100% of the time, but certainly having a foundation, of understanding of that as to what that is, to know what you're trying to build around. Are you trying to be luxury and serious? Are you trying to be luxury and fun? Are you trying to be cheap and crass? Like what is your brand identity to play into? Because then that dictates a lot of how you do your messaging, how you do your packaging, how you do, your social media, account, how you do your imagery. Like all that stuff plays into what is your brand personality. And again, it doesn't have to be like super super defined, which sometimes marketing executives get really in the weeds on mapping out every detail of that personality. You just need a general sense and play within a general boundary, and you'll be fine. um, so yeah.
No, yeah, I'm glad you framed it in that way where you just need enough. And that's where a lot of early founders especially get a little bit uh, I guess confused about this idea of documentation or guidelines, and they often find it extremely corporate and the
Yeah.
antithesis of what being a scrappy founder or especially a startup founder should be. And they operate in these extremes where it's like, no, we're not going to do any of that, we're just going to go 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 go. But then on the other side, all you're doing is documenting and daydreaming and stuff, right? You want to find
Right.
that balance. And so I appreciate you saying that it's really important and incredibly invaluable to just have enough so you understand what those goals are, and you're operating within a healthy constraint to make sure that you're delivering what is expected from your intended customers or your ideal target customer. And that also kind of touches on something else that you were just talking about, the differences between the market in China with online selling on social media and the market in America, where yeah, the market in China is further along. They've been doing this longer. The people are more accustomed to it and thus more receptive to it. But here in America, as you said, it's different, and it's not yet like that acceptable type of encounter with people on
Right.
social media. So this is something that happens often in many different markets with a lot of different products, and we've used this example in other office hours and discussions where you're looking at on-demand delivery services like Uber and well Uber Eats and DoorDash and the likes, but also ride sharing too. Early on in the first bubble, in the early 2000, there's a number of companies that raised millions and millions of dollars at the time, and they were catastrophic failures. And most of that was because of the market not yet being accustomed to getting in a car with a stranger that wasn't a taxi driver or limo, service, or having a stranger pick up their food and bring it to them, right? Like it just felt uncomfortable and it freaked a lot of people out. But then you jump forward, like 15 years, where Uber and
Right.
others, DoorDash, are, able to enter the market and thrive. I'm curious, when you're making those assessments and you're aware of the market conditions and you have this vision for something that is in the context of this market futuristic, right? It's gonna come at some point, but people aren't quite ready. How do you approach that and essentially create a pathway while doing just enough to interact with that market and get there? And you kind of mentioned already, you do things that are a little bit more culturally acceptable. But again, from a methodology standpoint, how do you go about identifying these different, traits, but also keep yourself from going too far ahead of where the market is currently?
Yeah, that's if you could figure that out, you're the billionaire. But no, you're right. And oftentimes it's the second mover that wins because the first mover was too early or they slightly misfired and didn't connect with the audience. And the second one learned from their mistakes and then can be the one who succeeds. I know there's some classic business literature about the second mover advantage versus the first mover advantage. First mover's got to be spot on and nail it. Second mover can sometimes overtake them because they can learn from that first mover's mistakes. So that's what you're talking about with like rideshare and stuff. And I'll even say like VR and things like that is still in that zone of like I've had an Oculus Rift for years and there's only like a handful of games on it. And um, it's going to have its day as as VR improves and more awareness comes and price points come down and all that. Um, so deciding where you position yourself and knowing what does that mean. If you know that something like VR is still years away, it's expensive to operate and maintain the business or the products or the development or whatever, then you need to know that you've got serious capital. You need to be working with investors who can give you that are worth waiting out the ride, but knowing you may be ahead of the pack because of that. So when it does hit and when it does have adoption, you can be a market leader and therefore, you're already massive. So understanding where your positioning is, understanding the cost of the ride, that's going to take to get there, robotics and things like that. The Android world, is one that we're not even there yet, but people are investing in it. It may not be these first folks that are the ones that end up being the winners, but they're hoping that they are because if they put in the time and effort and things hit at the right timing, then and before they run out of money, which is why the people doing it are the ones who are likely not going to run out of money because they're the ones who can afford it, and the other ones who aren't are probably going to fall by the wayside. So it really depends again on and a lot of it is just gut feel. Looking at things, it's very hard to analyze and predict a lot of that stuff. AI is another space that evolves on a daily, if not weekly basis, monthly basis. I mean, you start to look at just the progression of capabilities in that space. It's in the news like every day as to what's being improved and what new apps are coming out and what new capabilities or what things are failing, in that space. Um, I mean, for me, I use it for research. It can cut down on hours and hours of research. It can do in a split second. So if you're surfing the web trying to find answers to things or lists of companies, or you can do it in a second on AI. Um, the downside is I've started to have people in business do everything with me through AI, not themselves. They're not authoring things anymore. And so now you're like, I don't even know if this other person is smart. I don't even know if they know what it is they sent me. I don't, like, and so you're having to like go, well, wait a minute, is this them or is this AI that did it? And then you need to adapt accordingly. And soon people with that, theoretically I could put it into AI and say, okay, give answers back to that. And soon you're just having two people feed things into AI to negotiate a deal or whatever it is. And so there's some weird things evolving like that I'm sure soon will have their methodologies figured out. But understanding that and recognizing it, and from a brand and product standpoint, um, if you can do something that is based on a societal shift, that's what I always look at. That's where you can be positioned for something that can scale rapidly versus having to necessarily go head to head with people, because there's a lot of open space when you have a societal shift, where if you're a first mover, even if you have a lot of it wrong, you're going to get traction because you're riding the wave of a societal shift. Whether that was creating an e-commerce business of any kind in the early days of e-commerce, or creating an AI app of any kind in these early days of AI, you're going to get adoption to some degree, even if it's not great what you have. And then you just hope that you can figure out how to make it great, while you're there.
Appreciate the response for sure. And yeah, again, you bring up a lot of good points to be aware of. And yeah, there are some really weird things going on, and it's in every industry. Like this comes up a lot in the legal office hours because a lot of clients are trying to use AI to, in a lot of ways, they think get ahead of the work that the lawyer needs to do, but often what's happening is they're bringing a bunch of really ill-formed documents for the lawyer to review and then rewrite instead of just doing it from scratch the proper way. And the other thing that kind of happens too, and this is in different industries as well, um, a lot of times the AI isn't quite getting the research perfect, and then it's putting a lot of bad ideas into someone's mind, and then it creates a lot of points of conflict where no,
Right.
that like AI told me it's this way, and then
Right.
you're like, no, that's not correct, but AI told me. It's like, oh my god,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Hang on.
Well, I had that situation with somebody where they were negotiating a deal and they asked my advice, and the other side was using AI to craft the deal, and they were trying to do something non-standard. So AI didn't know how to deal with it non-standard. So the other side was like, "No, we can't do it. AI is telling me." It didn't say this, but like AI is telling me like this is the way we need to do it. So I advised my friend, well, go into AI and tell it to craft it in a way that it would approve of, but does the needs of what you want out of the deal, and show that back to the other guy. So he did that, showed it to the guy, and said, and the other guy was like, okay, if AI said it's good, it's good. Let's do it. And so it's like if people are relying on it, you can manipulate AI based on the way you prompt something to get it to give you the result you want.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up too, because that in itself is an opportunity to, you know, I mean, yeah, in some ways it's taking advantage of someone, but I mean, if they're putting themselves in a position like that, like by all means, teach them a lesson. It's a healthy lesson, but yeah. um, Boyne says, yeah, we can use AI to sort out the methodology, how people should use AI to negotiate with each other. Yes. Yeah, those joining over on LinkedIn, finding your way in, feel free to post any questions in chat or simply share what you're working on so Paul can give you answers or provide any sort of insights, feedback, advice based on what you're working on. Yeah, Boyne, you know what to do if you want to, jump on stage and ask a question. Feel free. Yeah, others in Twitch and on YouTube, same deal. Just use the chat. I'll relay everything over to Paul while we wait for someone to be brave and post some questions. Yeah, Paul, this comes up a lot often, but I like to hear from you. How important is it to focus on a very specific niche, a very specific target customer profile when you first begin versus trying to be a little bit more broad in your offering or your who you're going after?
Um, you can do either. Both have their pros and cons. It really depends on what your product or service or whatever dictates. That will tell you, is your audience big? Is it small? Or are you is the lowest hanging fruit a specific niche audience? After that, you may get other people. All too often, the assumption of brand owners is that their product is great for everybody because they're too in love with it themselves that they think everybody's going to want it. But you have to pretend you're the naysayer. Put yourself as the brand owner, as someone who, and how would you pick that apart? And if you can do that, and then you start to realize, well, no, really, my customer is this one specific type of person. 90%, the other 10%, yeah, maybe I can find some other people out there. So once you do that test yourself and really understand what reality is, then you can say, hey, maybe I should spend most of my time, if not all my time, on what is likely to be my core audience. Those other people may come down the road, but that will move you from the $100 million company to the $110 million company. But for the time being, to get to the $100 million company, you got to focus on your core audience. So usually, it's to me, it's dictated by the product or service who the audience really is. But you have to be realistic and ask yourself, who is that?
I think another key theme here is context matters and contextualizing this appropriately, which again is very important for everyone. I want to ask some questions for companies that are a little bit bigger. So you've done a lot of expansions, have different offices around the country. What sort of best practices and warnings would you give to someone when it comes to finding a new space and negotiating, yeah, the different terms for spaces that you're going to be utilizing?
Um, One is we've always tried to stay 1.5 steps ahead, but um, lessons learned would be when to know to retract, and to assume you may need to do that, and don't assume that if you need to retract, it means you're throwing in the towel. A lot of business owners are so gung ho that they're like, oh, well, if that happens, it's all over anyway. So screw it. I'm going full board. I'm going to sign a 10-year lease, or I'm going to do it, like, well, position yourself as much as you can to be nimble because you never know where the business is going to take you. You don't know where the economy is going to happen. You don't know if there's going to be blips. You don't know if you're going to have a giant customer that doesn't pay you. You just don't know what's around the corner. So the advice I would give across the board is try and be as nimble as possible, even if there's a slight extra cost to being nimble, um, because that value, I'll call it insurance, is worth more than the slight savings you might get to lock yourself into a situation that if any blip happens, you're screwed. Um, so, and go get lines of credit and loans when your business is doing really well and you don't need it because you won't get it when you need it.
Bonus tip. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious a little bit more about that on like the funding side, like, having working capital. Um, you've been doing this for a long time in a couple different areas. How has that, what, I guess, yeah, same kind of deal. Like, what kind of lessons have you learned at the different stages, right? When you're just first starting out and looking for capital, whether that was through lines of credit, banks or grants, investors, whatever it may be. But how has things changed as the business has grown, or as you've worked with smaller emerging spin ups through different partners that you've made?
That's a long, complex, answer. But I would say that it changes in terms of what are the things that become most critical that affect your business in the different stages. So, in the beginning, people are your most important asset that make or break your business. And having the right people on the team, having the right job assignments for what it is they're doing. They could be terrible in one job but great in another, and making sure you have them in the right slot that matches the way they think and their skill sets. Um, it's because you may like this person and think they're great, but they suck at their job, and you want to fire them. But you're like, oh, but there's something about them why I like them. So stick them in something that may be a better match for their skill set. I've done that and seen that work, and people have been here for years and years and years happily, and then all of a sudden we're happy with them. So at the same token, you can have somebody who's just inherently what I call a rebel rouser, who's just negative, and that's the way they think and talk, and they can bring the mood of an entire company down. One person. Getting rid of people like that, even though you hate letting people go or whatever, um, that changes the whole dynamic and energy of a company, which is highly important, especially when you're smaller and one person can have a group effect like that. So, and I would also say at that level, having people who have good critical thinking skills and ability to work on their own and figure things out and take charge, know when to ask questions, know when to lead on something. That is an extremely, extremely rare skill set, more rare than you would think. Most business owners who they're a business owner because they have that skill. Assume everybody else around them has that, and you'll find that maybe 1% or less does. And then you get frustrated that your staff can't operate at the level that you are. Well, that's because that's not the way they think, and they're going to be great at what it is they're doing, but you can't put expectations upon them that as if they're also the owner of the business. Otherwise, they'd be off owning their own business. So, um, recognizing that I think is key for success, happiness, growth, all that. Yeah.
Love it.
I picked one thing, but
Yeah, yeah, no, but that was a really good thing to pick, and I again, it's something I really appreciate in regards to taking the time to again contextualize who this person is, what their skill sets are, and where they can be most effective for the business and bring value. And sometimes that value it could be unprecedented compared to what you expect of them, especially if they're first starting in a position that may not be the best fit for them and the way they think, the skill sets they have, right? And like in a lot of these conversations and experience, right, the the best way to save money for your business is through retention of good employees, especially ones that have been around a while and they already kind of understand the higher level aspects of your business, the brand, the culture, and all that, and they're a good fit there. Well, yeah, it's going to be a lot easier and cost effective for your business to just put them in a better role for them rather than firing them and then going through job search and find
right.
someone new and train that person and hope that they're going to be a better fit, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's really, yeah, it's again good insights. I'm going to bring Boyne up. Let's see what Boyne's going to ask. All right, you should have an invitation now. Give it just a moment. And then again, those of you on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, post some questions in chat for Paul. That's why he's here. This is an interactive experience. Hello, Boyne.
Yes, yeah, sorry, the camera was pointed the wrong way. Uh, my wife is away from home, so I have two puppies here, and she wants to see them sitting on my lap. So the camera was pointed the way for the puppies to be seen if I hold them. Sorry about that. So yeah, we were talking about branding and yeah, creating exposure, and I'm trying to remember the right phrasing, but basically engagement with the customers, and engaging and creating more or less kind of sort of personal relationship with the customers per se, right? So effectively a more individualistic kind of association, rather than, I mean, associating the brand with a certain personality and so on and so forth. And yeah, I understand that as example. I mean, Apple was Steve Jobs, right, in those days. And before Elon Musk went off the deep end, Tesla was Elon Musk, right? I mean, effectively, as SpaceX. But now I want to ask in terms of some things I am doing. So let's say in terms of Visuino. And yeah, I know that I mean, a lot of customers, I have been told they associate Visuino with me, and it's the personal whatever connection they feel with me through it, whatever. The point is, from a more practical point of view, if you can give me some advice of how best to engage people, and how best to basically spread the word about Visuino. It's not exactly the same topic, but it's close enough. So now with tariffs and all of that stuff, I am experiencing considerable drop in sales, right? Ever since the rhetoric, the toxic rhetoric started. Considering that most of my customers are international, this rhetoric definitely has a severe effect on sales. Let's put it to that. And number one, yeah, I want to. I mean, I am not personally associated with this rhetoric. I don't condone that. I mean, I am as far as possible on the other side from such type of rhetoric. Number one. And number two, in this type of environment and in any type of environment, what I can do to better engage the customers, what I can do to better
Yeah.
spread the word about the product, and so on and so forth. I mean, general marketing ideas and suggestions.
So I know a little bit about your business since you're
Oh,
local
thank you.
with the same
Yeah,
group with
yeah.
Gary and everybody. And doing software and hardware. So you're really B2B, which means your marketing is a B2B type of marketing, not out like direct to consumer. So things like LinkedIn, posting
It's
on
it's
LinkedIn.
it's actually mostly direct to consumers. Most of my customers are like students, artists, hobbies, people at home. That's 90% of the business. Yeah, I
for
have
for the
I have
product you created, not for other products you can create. So
I'm talking about the my product, right? So the
what's
majority of
what's the website of your product?
Visuino. So
Nice.
that would be 1 second.
Yeah, drop it in the
That
chat.
that would be
Yeah,
yeah,
let's take a look.
okay, yeah, I'll drop it in the chat. That's the easiest. So
Because I
again,
know
I
you do
have
custom software and custom hardware and stuff for people that
no,
that's
I don't do custom software.
oh, there it
I
is.
have existing products which I effectively sell. I mean, I do occasionally custom software, but that's kind of rarely on individual cases, and I avoid doing that unless it's a friend or somebody I know that needs some help or whatever. So basically, Visuino, I'm selling it into two different markets. There is standard and professional version, and yes, the professional version is more for the mainstream stream industry. And yes, I mean, I understand how they should be engaged, but the majority of the sales and the majority of the customers are just average people, students, hobbyists, artists, right? I mean, all kinds of folks
Hmm.
effectively worldwide.
And
So
are they using, so like, looking at your website now,
yeah,
it's the ability to, for people who are not looking at it, it's the ability to use like a flow chart for programming. So you can
yeah,
drag and
yeah,
drop
yeah,
elements
yeah,
into a
yeah.
flow chart. So you don't have to
Yeah,
be a programmer, and you can
absolutely.
create
Yes,
complex
yes,
programming tools.
exactly, exactly. You nailed it. You nailed
Yeah.
it. So the idea is that anybody without the need to study software development and without the need to even understand it, pretty much intuitively be
So
able to create the project.
I would say the best way to market something like this is to give people the use cases of how they can
Mhm.
use it. So when someone listening, if you say, "Oh, I have the software thing that makes programming easier," it doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Give me an example that I may relate to and go, "Oh, wait a
Uh-huh.
minute, I need to do that. I need to use that." And so to me, that marketing, as opposed to on something like this, as opposed to being broad about what it can do, I don't know how that relates to me.
Mhm.
So figuring out, the laundry list of examples, not only in how your marketing literature is written or how you create, social media posts or whatever it is, but how you create keywords and things on your website, and other thing, like how to, or even sub pages. You could have a whole page. Okay, if you're developing something about this, here's how you do it with my software. And if you're doing something like this, here's how you do it with my software. And you
Mhm.
create a whole bunch of pages on your website, one page,
Yeah.
each one about
Well,
each different use case.
one second, because again, yeah, I want to see if it is on the website. Come on.
Yeah, like what you're talking about, Paul, it goes back to our discussion earlier in regards to storytelling, right?
Yeah.
And you want to tell a very concise, succinct, to the point story related to each of these use cases. And Boyne, like you're saying, for the 90% of your customer base are individuals, right? And these
Yes.
individuals are students or artists, or they fall into different use cases, these individuals. So like Paul's saying, having a very specific story crafted for them, showing someone
Mhm.
like them using the product in a way that is relatable and fun and exciting and very easy to relate to is going to
Mhm.
Yeah.
go a long way. And you
Yes.
like again, you can bring in your personality to that, because like you said, at this stage right now, you are Visuino. People resonate with you, they
Yeah.
relate to you. So you want these stories, the brand, your personal brand, to be represented through your company brand as well. But when you're showcasing, these different stories and these different use cases, depending on what resources you have, you want to show someone like a student, show a student, right? Not yourself as a student, show an actual student. And like we've like talked about before with like landing page reviews and workshops, it doesn't need to be this extensive video. It could
Mhm.
be a simple storyboard approach where
Yeah.
it's like just
Mhm.
maybe like 3 to 5 images, which is walking someone through the user experience of a student doing this. Or you use like like same storyboard, and each of those images are just real
But
like gifs, like just very short gifs. Yeah, Paul.
yeah, I was going to say, looking at this and thinking about it more, it actually relates to the conversation we just had earlier about how big is your audience and who is your audience. Um, I am not the audience for this product. I don't even know what some of these technical terms are on the homepage. I'm not going to be sitting there dragging. I'm not creating PLC boards or Arduinos, program. Like, it's not what I do. I'm not a hobbyist in that. This is not for me. The people who are in these spaces are really in these spaces, and they're chatting on Reddit, and they're trading tips on the programming websites. It's a very defined, specific community. And what I would say in something like this, um, is I would try to create your community around those people and focus on community, because they're going to sell your product to everybody else in their community. If you get known, and like was an investor in a tattoo care products company. I have no tattoos myself, but we created what's called a pro team. So all of these famous artists we gave free product to, and we put them on the website. We linked to their tattoo shop, and these are like, the MVPs of the Michael Jordans of the tattoo industry kind of thing were on there. And they're the ones, now touting it, or anybody who's an up and coming tattoo artist sees their names and goes, oh, this must be for me. So if there's a way that people think there's a community and see there's a community, they're like, oh my gosh, the community is using this product. I should get in on it because I am a part of that community. So creating a pro team, creating your own, like the way they do it with some of the, if you go on some of the customer service sites for some of these software companies, there's people who are like gold star respondent or whatever, who just answer questions for free and they don't even work for the company. Um, because they love to tout their own expertise. They love to help people. They love to, so creating, a plugin, if you had, I know there's plugins out there that do that, that create forums and things like that. Having a very robust forum community for something like this and giving people, you're a gold star respondent, you're a platinum, like gamify it so they can get involved and feel like they're important within that community. Reddit and some of the other, like what's
Discord would be, I think, a good one for
Discord,
this. Like,
Yeah.
well, like building, like real quick on Discord, they recently launched like a monetization component, so people can pay a subscription and get digital products through Discord, and I think it's like 90% revenue share with the server owner, the creators, and that might be a great way to build community on Discord, but also create all these extra perks around the community where those that are paying the subscription get access to like private channels or access to you, right? And it might not scale really, really crazy, but early on, right, it could be a perk, like an early entry kind of like, perk where, yeah, they get access to you directly. You do office hours, right? Maybe you do office hours like twice a week. And that's a group kind of, thing where a lot of people that can scale pretty well. And if they're subscribers on the Discord through your community, they can interact with you directly, twice a week and get answers question.
or you start to bring on your black belts or your 5 stars or whatever,
Yeah.
that are in your community to lead some of those sessions. If you can really build that up, this world of programmers or hobbyist programmers that know these terms and want to use this and have tools that are similar and your tool is better, like building up that sense of community will create become a draw. I think I would focus on that more than Facebook ads or LinkedIn ads, or I would focus on building a community, because you have a very niche audience that all talks to each other, that all chats in the same chat board. They will do the marketing for you. And that's how I think about it. Build your sales team as your existing power users. Take the people who already love your product, make them your VIPs, give them VIP level status, through forums where they're 5-star respondents kind of thing. They will become your sales reps.
Yeah, and there's other ways to build on this too, like Paul's saying, where you approach this like a partnership with these really top power users that are very skilled. You highlight them on the website. You use them as your case studies, showcasing what they're capable of doing with your software. And then you could also, do ways or have ways to promote them monetizing their expertise through your community as well, where, if you want to, contract this person to work with, you, or do like a training session with you, then you're helping facilitate that in addition to whatever their business is that they're utilizing Visuino for, right? So there's different ways that you can, create these wonderful experiences with your brand, with your community, and your product in different ways. And something else that I'm curious about, and Paul, like, you might be able to like add to this, is this business model. It reminds me very much of Adobe before Adobe switched to SaaS, where their main customer acquisition strategy, was giving the software to every single university and school and art department at all different levels to get people attached to the product and integrated in their workflows at the earliest stages.
Yeah.
Like a photographer, I was using it in high school, and I still use Adobe now because that's what I grew up
You got
on.
for free.
I
You
got
got for
it.
free
Yeah.
from the university. Yeah.
Yep. And that's what I built into my workflow, and it became a staple of my workflow, right? And the goal there is for me, as I became a professional, to upgrade once I'm like, out in as a
Yep.
professional and I need to use this, right? And then bigger picture, it's also for Adobe to get those larger enterprise licenses in place with design studios
Right.
or,
And in fact,
whatever it
yeah,
is.
you could set it up, as an enterprise fee that's really large, but for academic institutions, it's free if you can afford to
Yeah,
do that to them.
I mean, my product has, I mean, Visuino has free version to start with, right? So anybody can download and use free version. They don't even have to bother to register at this point. So that, but yeah, I mean, those are pretty good feedbacks. I actually, while we were talking, I already passed some of them to the guy who is helping me with the marketing side. So some of the ideas that you guys presented, he's starting already to work on them as we're speaking.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think
yes.
though, like Paul and I are talking about, it's great that you're to have a free version, but like what can you do to contact and establish strategic partnerships with
Mhm.
different schools, universities, and whether this is private or public institutions, to give them their
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
free
yeah, got
free
it, got
access
it.
to their
Yeah,
students,
got it.
right? And then the other thing that might be an interesting tie-in is working with these different strategic partners, that is educational institutions, and set up a pathway to highlight students and use them on the student page and be like, hey, every year we're gonna do a contest and select the top 10 students, and we're going to highlight their work and we're going to highlight
Mhm,
them
mhm,
on the student
mhm,
page and use
mhm,
them as the case
mhm,
study, right? So it's
mhm.
just like different ways to tell the story.
Yeah.
And
Got
yeah.
it, got it. Mhm, 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 mhm. No, those are very good ideas. I mean, we, to be honest, to some extent, some elements of what we discussed, we already have been doing it, but definitely there is more to be done, and you guys kind of put it in much better terms, quite frankly. So I mean, yeah, we have Facebook communities for Visuino where both me and the guy that's helping me are answering questions. We have Discord. We had MeWe. Before that, we had Google Plus. I mean, I had over 10,000 members in that community. Unfortunately, Google Plus shut down. Uh, Again, the idea of creating our own forum is a good idea because, again, as you said, I can gamify it better there. So we'll have to look what we can do in terms of that. Maybe that's the better option than using those other communities. Again, each one has pluses and minuses, so we'll have to figure out. And yes, better engagement in schools. I just became member of the LA STEM Collective, and I am trying through them to get more into school programs and stuff. And again, my problem is that I'm engineer. I'm not exactly a salesperson, so I don't know exactly how to go around and sell stuff. I know how to build stuff, right? So, uh,
Yeah, but
but
going back
I'm
to
trying to
the
engage.
real quick point, like,
Yeah.
don't worry about being a salesperson. And Paul, I'd love to hear more on your insights on this too. But it came up earlier, right? Like, you focus on you as a person and build relationships authentically as a person. Don't worry about like doing these sales pitches. It goes back to telling your story and being a part of the story, right? And giving people an opportunity to play a role in the story that you're already engaged in, right? Like, Paul, I mean, like, you said the people around you are the most like valuable resources that you can have. So, what kind of advice would you have for Boyne, someone that is, not feeling so confident as a salesperson, but is already engaged and already someone that people
Yeah,
enjoy being around in this world?
I would, first of all, recognizing your website and your concept and all that is a national or international concept. It is not a local concept. So going to local networking groups is great for your own personal edification to learn and have mentors and advice and things, but it's not going to be where you get your meaningful customers. And being that you're not necessarily focused on being a big marketer and or wanting to put a ton of money into marketing or whatever, I'm assuming. Letting your users be your marketers through what we were talking about with this idea of community, that would, if they start using it and they start becoming black belts or 5 stars or diamond status or whatever, they're going to feel motivated to start telling everybody they know who are also, into what they are into, to use the software because they're the black belt or the 5 star or the platinum, whatever. You've created your sales reps. So you're no
Yeah,
longer the sales rep. You need to empower them to be your sales reps, because they have their own communities. And if you get 100 people to, like this, to go to their friends who are in doing the same stuff like this because they're in school together or they're in the same, hobbyists or they're the same industry, and they talk about how great it is and they share tips and tricks and things with each other on the chat boards and forums and all that you've created, then those people will start to really get into it. And then they'll start to go out to their network because they're earning their status within your community. And all of a sudden, you've built this viral community that is just bringing in customers left and right without having to spend on marketing, without having to misfire and not find the customer, because your customer is very, very specific, who's into this kind of thing. So just get the ones who are already into it, already using your software, and they're your sales reps.
yeah, we're working with quite few such people, and again, there is fair number of people that are creating content, posting YouTube videos, posting tutorials and stuff like that, right? So there are probably at least 20, 30 people that
Right.
do that on their
But
channels
now you
and
got to
stuff.
bring them in and you got to give them
Yes,
their gold status or whatever it is. And
yes,
so now
yes,
they're like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, they feel part of your company.
yeah,
They're gonna,
yeah. Agree,
proselytize for
agree,
you even
agree,
more.
agree.
It's
Yeah,
it's it's
yeah,
like Paul was
that's very
saying
good.
earlier. You've got good stuff happening. How do you turn it from good to great, right? And it's about, you know setting those constraints, being very very focused and intentional with everything as it relates to these different agendas for your business. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you guys. I think I took quite some of your time, but yeah, I think you guys gave me very sound and good advice. And as we speak, we already have started working on some of that.
Awesome.
I'm not wasting time.
That's the way to do it. Paul, we're at time. So, do you have any final thoughts? Any little tidbits of immense experience and best practices, warnings to give to people?
Um, No, I mean, I would say, being on things like this, finding places where you can network. You never know what little tidbit of information resonates to you or gives you an idea. You may have heard something, just what we're talking about with Boy, and you're like, "Oh, I could create a community," even though your thing has nothing to do with his world. But ideas come from just being out there, and so I used to be sort of heads down, focused on executing and operations of what I do, because it's a lot of it's operations based, and started getting out there and doing some networking with a group that that Gary runs locally here, and then that leads to another group, and then you meet other people, and then all of a sudden I'm finding a majority of my B2B customers are coming from word of mouth referrals from people I've met through networking. Um, not from advertising online, not from competing head to head with people on price or whatever. It's coming from referrals from people I've gotten to know or then they've introduced me to somebody I've gotten to know, and then and all of a sudden you have these sort of sales reps. Not intentionally, you're just meeting, and usually what I'm doing is I'm trying to help them and connect them to people. And if I run into somebody now who's like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to figure out how to program something, and I want to put in the time, but I just don't have the skills. I'm going to know where to send them. And so that. I love connecting people, and not looking for anything in return, and sort of karmically you find it comes back to you, because people in general, I found, want to help connect other people. They want to help. Again, I'm going to point back to ego. It makes them feel good. And so that would be my parting advice, is doing things like this, getting out there, not necessarily having to keep your head down. Um, on the other hand, there are people who just network all the time and never actually execute on their project or their business because they're too busy out there networking, thinking that is going to magically lead to success. It doesn't. You gotta still do it. But finding that balance, I think is great. And there's many things out there: virtual, in person, um, conferences, things like that, where people are in a mindset to help each other.
Again, wonderful insights, good lessons, and yeah, again, finding that balance is integral for success. So, yeah, Blaine, thanks for coming up and being brave, and yeah, sharing great story, and asking some great questions. And Paul, you're amazing. Thank you so much for sharing a whole breadth of amazing insights and advice with people. Those of you watching on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, thanks for tuning in and being a part of this. I hope next time you're braver. I want to have more questions for Paul. All right. With
I'll be
that,
back.
yeah, good. You will be back because you're awesome. All right. Everyone have a wonderful weekend. And yeah, don't work too hard. It's Friday. Have fun.